Hey everybody, welcome back to Living Traditions Homestead. It's another day for us to work in the garden. We've gotten some things done earlier in the day that we want to share with you, but then we're starting new parts of getting the garden ready to start planting, and hopefully things will go really well and we'll be able to start planting today.
So let's take a walk around the garden real quickly, and then we're going to get started hooking up our drip tape irrigation system, and after that we can get started putting some tomatoes in the ground.
Well, last time we were in the garden with you all, we were laying down all of this woven weed fabric. If you haven't had a chance to check that out and learn how we do that, make sure you check out that video. Also in that video, we started burning holes in the fabric so that we could start planting the plants. So make sure you check that out if you're wondering how in the world we plant in this woven weed fabric. We got all the holes burned this morning that we weren't able to do last time because we were rained out. And then we put up all of the trellises here. We grow a lot of our vegetables on trellises like this. This is just field fencing, some animal fencing here with T-posts that we drive into the ground. The trellises we will be using for our pinto beans because they grow straight up. And we use them to support our peppers, our tomato plants. We grow our cucumbers up the trellises as well as butternut squash. So we got all of these put up this morning. They look fantastic. And now we're just ready to get our drip system in. We always have questions about the drip system, so we wanted to make sure to bring you along to that today. And hopefully we'll be able to plant some tomatoes like we had said before and get this garden underway.
All right, it's time to start putting up our drip tape irrigation system. Now, this is a really easy way to water your garden and a very effective way because you're watering right at the ground level. You're not wasting a lot of water by spraying it overhead with sprinklers and things like that. And you're avoiding a lot of those problems that overhead watering can cause, like powdery mildew and different blights and things. This will do a much better job of watering your garden. Now, when we first started using this, I thought it was very confusing, but I promise it's a very simple system to set up. Only a few different parts, and once you know what you're doing, it's really a fast system. So the first thing that you're going to have is what's called mainline tubing. This is a heavier gauge tube, looks like this, and this year we're actually putting down a new piece. You can reuse this year after year, even if you need to move your rows around. They've got little plugs you can put in here, and then you can move your row to a different spot. But this year, because we've reused our other piece so many times now, we're just going to put down a new piece. So the first thing we're going to do is just roll this out to the length of the garden. On one end, we'll be putting an adapter that looks like this. This is so our garden hose can hook to it. That'll just slide on like this. And on the other end is just a cap so that the water stops there, and that just slides on. So we're going to get that down first. We'll just roll this out, and then we'll use some of our landscape staples that we use to hold down the plastic. We'll put a few of those in place just to hold this along the side of the garden. All right, now that we have our main line laid out here along the side of the garden, I'm going to just pull it tight, and our last row of plants is going to be right here. We're going to be planting some sunflowers back here. So I'm going to cut this just a little bit longer than the last row of plants. All right, and now that we've got that cut, we'll just take the end cap, and these just push on like that. And now we'll use one of our staples. We'll make sure that this is running in the right spot here. Take one of our staples, pound that in, and we've got our main line all installed. The next step is going to be actually running our drip tape out of this. That's what we'll work on next. So the next step is to actually start installing our drip tape. If you're not familiar with what drip tape looks like this. It comes on a big roll. It's a real thin plastic, and every 12 inches there's a little slit in the plastic, and there's a little emitter where water will come out. When you're running your drip system, the water will literally just drip out of each one of those and water your row of plants. Now, we get a lot of questions about, do we need to make sure that our plants line up with all of the emitters on the drip tape? And the answer is no, you do not. When you run it, you'll run it long enough that it waters, and the water spreads out everywhere and waters all of your plants, even if they're not right next to an emitter. So don't worry about that at all. I promise it'll do a good job. The other thing we get a lot of questions about is whether or not the drip tape should go on top of the woven weed fabric or below. And there's a lot of debate about that, and both ways will work. We always run our drip tape on top of the woven ground cover. The water will still go through just fine and get to your plants. The reason we like it on top of the weed fabric is because if there's a problem or your lines shift at all, they're on top and you can see that there's a problem. If they're underneath, you'll just never know until maybe you start to have a problem with your plants. So for us, we always like to put it on top, but again, both ways work. You do what you are comfortable with. All right, these are really easy to hook up, which is another really great thing about them. You're going to have just a couple of parts. You're going to start with a little thing that looks like this. This actually connects to the piece of drip tape, and it also connects to your main line. On this end is just a little nipple right there, and you're going to use a tool, a little punch, to make a hole in your main line where this will slide in. So we're going to use our punch. Now our first row here is for beans, and you can see here's all the holes where the beans are going to go. So I'm going to just try to go a little bit off center from that, and I'll just take my punch. I'll just literally make a hole in the tube, and then this will just slide right in like that, and we're ready to connect our drip tape. The drip tape will slide on like that, and then you'll slide that up and over, and your piece of drip tape is all connected. Now we'll just stretch this out down the row and secure it with some more of the staples. What I like to do personally is to take 2 of the staples and put them one on each side of the drip tape on the main line, and that way you have a good way to be able to pull this down your row and keep it nice and secure. And I will just stretch this out down the row. Now we're using the same drip tape that we used last year, so our pieces are already cut. Like I said, when you buy this new, it'll come on a roll, and you just roll it out and then cut your ends. So we'll stretch this out to the far end, secure it, probably 3 or 4 staples. You don't have to put a lot of staples in, and you don't want them super tight so that they're not pinching off your, so that the water can still flow okay. So we'll just do that. We'll put this down on the other end, and we'll move on to the next row. So down on this end, I'm just going to pull the piece of drip tape a little bit. I'm not going to yank on it, and I'm going to look down my row of plants, make sure that it's running where I want it to go. Now, if this were a brand new piece, you'd cut this, and there's these little clips that you fold the end of the drip tape over and slide this on, and that makes the end so that no water can come out. Ours are already done since we're reusing pieces from last year. So I'll just pull that, make sure it looks good where my row of plants is, and then I'll take another staple, pound that in to hold it in place, and I'll just go back and put a few along the row to make sure it stays where we want it. We'll move on to the next row of beans. And you want to make sure that you have your emitters side up, not down. Well, we've got the drip irrigation system completely in. We've got one running down every row of the garden that we're going to be planting. And now is one of the most exciting times of year. Almost as good as the day you pick your first tomato of the summer. That is, we're going to start planting tomato plants. We're going to start by planting two of our absolute favorites, which are the Jet Star and Jet Setter. We're going to do an entire row of those. Let's get started. Now, when we plant our tomatoes, we like to use one of these drill augers. We started using this last year, and this thing is great. Basically, I'll go down the row and I will drill the hole where all of the tomato plants are going to go. Sarah will follow behind, putting in the tomatoes, and we'll work as a team, and we'll be able to get a row done in no time at all. Now, if you guys haven't seen these before, I hadn't used one before last year, and I absolutely fell in love with it. It's basically an auger. You can drill as deep as you want, and it just makes it super fast. So much faster than digging with a shovel. Let's do the first hole and I'll show you what I mean. And there's our hole. And we'll just go down the row and do every hole that way and start planting our tomatoes.
Okay, let's get started planting our tomatoes. I love to grow tomatoes. It's probably one of my favorite things to grow, besides peppers. They're my number one. We're starting off with Jet Star. This is our favorite slicing tomato. I also use it to can diced tomatoes and tomato juice. It is a hybrid tomato, but it's very consistent, gorgeous size, gorgeous color, nice solid on the inside. So we're going to plant this in the hole that Kevin made for me. Now with tomato plants, you want to plant them very deep. So I'm going to start by removing a lot of these leaves, because planting them deep in the hole will allow roots to grow all up the stem into the ground and make a very healthy, sturdy plant. So I'm going to tip it out of this pot here. I'm going to ruffle up these roots a little bit. Now we're going to put it deep in the hole, but first, my secret to growing amazing tomato plants, and really most of the plant starts that we put into the garden, is to start off with a handful of rabbit manure down in the hole. It gives it some really nice nutrients and fertilizer down in there. And then we're just going to put this down in the hole all the way down. And we're going to start covering it up with the dirt, backfilling. So you can see that you can start off with a pretty tall plant, and by the time you put it deep down in that hole, it's pretty short. But that's okay. It's going to make a very healthy, sturdy plant. It might take a while for you to see this plant really starting to put on some growth, but that's because most of the growth is happening underground with all of the roots establishing itself. So don't worry if for the first few weeks they don't really do much. Just keep taking good care of them and watering them, and they will do great. Now if you want to, also, you can put some rabbit manure on top. You can sprinkle some on there. And this is kind of like time-released fertilizer for them. And then for at least a month or so, these will continue to give nutrients down through the soil into the new root system. Planting tomatoes is as easy as that. Now we just got to move on and plant all of the rest of them. Well, the first row in the garden is planted. Thankfully, they are tomatoes, which is the most exciting part of planting the garden.
Absolutely. Those of you who know me know that I love tomatoes, and I love that time of year when I can walk around with a salt shaker right in my pocket and just eat while I'm working.
It's been a long day, you guys. It's been about 10 hours. We finished up all the holes in the garden, put up 8 rows of trellises, the entire watering system, and the 1 row of tomatoes.
We still have a lot of work to do in here as far as getting things planted. Do you guys want to see what else we're planting in this garden? If you do, leave it in the comments below and we'll bring you along as we get everything else planted. We've got a lot of great things that we're growing this year. Our theme this year for our garden is back to basics. It's planting those things that produce really well, that we know we love to eat, and that we'll be able to store and provide good food all winter long.
You guys, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here, make sure you subscribe. And the best way that you can help us here is to share our videos and all your social media with like-minded people. Until next time, thank you so much for stopping by our homestead. Take care and God bless.
God bless.